Hey, Ben from Lover of Tech and welcome back to the channel. This is another camera comparison between the iPhone XS Max and the OnePlus 6T, but this time we're testing out the photo performance between both these cameras in different situations in daylight and in low light. But I'm just going to run you through the main camera specifications for the main cameras as well as the selfie, starting with the OnePlus 6T. The OnePlus 6T is running a dual camera system on the rear. The main camera is a 60 megapixel camera at f1.7 aperture at 25mm. The second one is more of a depth perception camera and also used to help with low light. It's not an ultra wide or telephoto zoom. It's the same 25mm f1.7 aperture focal length, but it is at 20 megapixels. The main camera, the 60 megapixel one, does have optical image stabilization. The selfie camera on the OnePlus 6T is a 60 megapixel camera with an f2.0 aperture as well. Now the iPhone X has a dual 12 megapixel camera at the rear. The main one is an f1.7 aperture and also a telephoto ×2 zoom lens, which is equivalent to 52mm, which also is an f2.4 aperture and has optical image stabilization as well as the main camera as well. Now the selfie camera is a 7 megapixel f2.2 aperture lens as well. Now all the main camera specification will be in the description below, but now let's start off with the photo test, starting with nighttime. Now starting with this first shot, we have the OnePlus 6T on the left and we have the iPhone XS Max on the right. And you can see that the iPhone XS is definitely much more cropped. It doesn't have much of a wide angle compared to what you're seeing on the OnePlus 6T. There is a slightly yellowish tint on the 6T, which I'm not sure if I like. I do like how the color temperature is on the iPhone XS Max, but I like the fact that you're getting a wider field of view and I'm seeing more of my face when it comes to the iPhone. This is much more of a toss-up. It really just depends on if you prefer the color temperature and the exposure on the iPhone. But the OnePlus 6T to me does look a bit sharper, but it's just that tint of color on there. But again, let me know which one you like out of the two in the comments below. Now this next shot with the flash illumination for the selfie, the OnePlus 6T for me definitely takes it. The color rendition, the sharpness, the exposure, the wider field of view, especially the sharpness, is something that definitely is something that I like between the two. The iPhone XS just looks muddy, it looks soft, there's the crop, it's not as wide, and there's no sharpness. Although the flash illumination is really good on there, I definitely say the OnePlus 6T. Let me know what you think, but I think the 6T takes it on this one. Now this next shot of the cabinet here, I do definitely like what I'm seeing on the iPhone XS Max. It just looks a lot more neutral. It is a little bit closer in terms of field of view, but I definitely like how the image is looking much cleaner. But the OnePlus 6T is definitely holding up here, but I do like what I'm seeing on the iPhone XS Max. And with the flash illumination on the cabinet with the next shot, I actually like the OnePlus 6T. It's a little bit more toned down, which I was kind of surprised, especially if you look at the brick layer at the back. The light in exposure is very even, so it's not too blown out, which seems like it's something that is happening on the iPhone XS Max, and which is unusual because iPhones are very good at slow sync flash light exposure, which is not something I'm necessarily seeing here. Not that it's not in action, but I say the 6T looks better here for me. This next shot of the Europe card sign, I'll definitely say both have actually done a really good job. The main differences I can see is the color temperature. The iPhone XS Max is definitely a bit more cooler to the side, where it's slightly warmer, but you really have to look close to see. But both have rendered the yellow underneath the Europe card sign really well. The exposure is done really well. I would say around the Europe card sign itself, maybe the iPhone is a little bit brighter, but overall I think it's actually quite even. And both in their respective ×2 zoom mode. Remember, with the OnePlus 6T, it does not have a telephoto zoom. It is just a ×2 digital zoom mode, and most likely at nighttime as well, the iPhone is most likely not using the telephoto zoom. It's probably using a digital zoom as well. So take that into account when you're actually looking at this, and we're breaking it down. The characteristics are near enough the same. Slightly cooler on the iPhone, slightly brighter exposure on the Europe card sign, slightly darker and more even exposure with the 6T around the Europe card sign, but a warmer color temperature when you're looking at the signs beneath. So again, I think this is a toss-up based on personal preference, but I may lean slightly more to the iPhone XS Max because of the slightly bright exposure. But again, let me know which one you prefer out of the two. Now this next shot of the Europe card sign, both actually are looking very clean. I had to really take a double look at this, but both are really doing well when it comes to noise reduction and giving a sharp, clean image. It's again, just the color temperatures are slightly different. This time, the iPhone is throwing a much more warmer tint to it, whereas the OnePlus 6T, very even color temperature neutral there as well. But the sharpness, the noise reduction on both are really good. To me, it's a toss-up. I'm struggling to really tell the difference between the two, but let me know what you think as you're looking at the image here. And zooming into the image, again, to my surprise, I'm seeing a slightly better image on the 6T when it comes to this. It's not that the iPhone is not doing well, but it looks a little bit more noisy and grainy to my eyes. I think the 6T is pulling off a much better image here, which really surprised me. It might be down to the fact that it's got a higher megapixel count at low light when it zooms in digitally. Both of them are doing that, and it seems like the 6T is just pulling off a better job. Interesting. Now, this next shot of the bush, color temperatures have switched around again. The iPhone definitely much more cooler and more neutral. Warmer on the 6T on the left. Both in terms of softness is pretty much the same. I would like it to be a bit more sharper, but again, I think in terms of just the longer exposure at nighttime is really hard to do that. So you kind of just have to take into account when there's no flash, this is the kind of results you're going to be getting. But I lean more towards the color temperature that I'm seeing on the iPhone XS Max because I just like it a bit more even. So yeah, that's my personal preference. Let me know which one you like out of the two on this particular image. Now with the flashlight, I would definitely say that the iPhone XS Max is definitely more true to life. The colors on the 6T are way off to what I was seeing on there with the bush. The iPhone XS wins it, but again, it doesn't mean it's not pleasing. I do like the exposure of the lighting. I think both know how to expose with the flash well. So in tricky situations, if you really have to use the flash, at least it's something you can rely on. Now this is a low light shot of myself, and it's a really hard toss up. I think I lean towards more the 6T, and this is not because of anything in terms of the iPhone not being good at low light. It's the sharpness. The iPhone is just a bit too soft and too muddy for me. There's a lot more artifact, and if you look at the blue sky as well as even around my face, it's a lot more muddy, where I am seeing a slightly sharper image. And in terms of the color tint, again, that kind of yellow orangey tint that you're getting on the OnePlus 6T is not something I like. So definitely when it comes to the color temperature, I like what I'm seeing on the iPhone, but the sharpness and in terms of the exposure, to me, it's surprising, but the 6T is doing a much better job here to me. But again, let me know if you disagree. Let's have that discussion. But so far, I think I'm leaning more to the 6T on this one. Now, I used the 6T's night mode on this next shot because I really wanted to see the difference in exposure. And it does help a little bit. I don't know if obviously it's meant to be used on people or it's more on just landscapes or just in really dark situations, but I think it does a decent job to really help boost the exposure. So, I mean, it's something that takes a bit longer, so take it into account when it comes to the shooting times and whatnot. But that is the night mode on the OnePlus 6T. Right, so we've gone through the low light test. Let's switch over to daylight. And with daylight, we are really going to be seeing in different lighting situations, harsh, as well as just how the exposure changes, how things are going to be changing between these two cameras and how they handle it. First shot, OnePlus 6T on the left, iPhone XS on the right, and both are doing a really good job. In previous OnePlus devices have really struggled with dynamic range, and I think it's more of a software processing thing because the hardware is there. I actually think it's exposed well. It's slightly a bit more underexposed when it comes to the shadow details, and that's just understandable based on such a harsh, tricky lighting. So I would say that the iPhone is doing a slightly better job in terms of shadow exposure on the foreground, being a bit more brighter that you can see. But don't take it away from the 6T. I think the 6T is doing a really good job here. Again, let me know what you think. Now, here's where the struggle is with dynamic range and the inconsistency with the OnePlus 6T. The iPhone definitely takes it. The sun is completely blown out on the OnePlus 6T on the left, whereas the iPhone is perfectly evenly exposed. It's really handled it. I struggled to see into the sun. I had to put my sunshades on, so you can really see that the smart HDR feature on the iPhone is really kicking in well. I really like what I'm seeing here. This is a struggle for the OnePlus 6T. I'll say that the iPhone takes it on this particular one. Now, this next landscape shot between both these phones, I'll say the 6T did a much better job with the dynamic range. It handled it a lot better, but I'll say that the shadow detail is better on the iPhone XS Max. Let me know which one you think. But in terms of details and the colors, it's really nice what I'm seeing on both. Very, very even across the board. Very similar in terms of characteristics. Slightly more rich on the 6T. Much more realistic and even on the iPhone XS Max. But hey, let me know which one you think, but that's what I'm seeing to the image right now. This next picture of the statue on the foreground, the exposure and the shadow detail is so much better on the iPhone XS. Whereas the 6T, you can see that it's dark on the foreground and it's struggling to balance out the harsh lighting situation to make sure that the foreground is properly exposed with the shadow details. So I definitely prefer what I'm seeing on the iPhone XS Max, but again, let me know which one you like out of the two. If you agree or disagree, let's have that discussion. But I would put it more to the iPhone XS on this particular shot. Now in the ×2 mode on this statue, there's enough light on the telephoto zoom for the iPhone XS to work. And you can definitely see that it's much better when it comes to the exposure, the sharpness and the detail. But the 6T does well considering its digital zoom, but it's just a darker image. In terms of the exposure, it's struggling to balance it out. But in terms of the background, it does expose the background really well. But the foreground is the subject. I don't really like the exposure of it compared to the iPhone XS Max. But again, let me know if you agree or you disagree. Now let's kick it in with the selfies. I do like the color rendition of what I'm seeing on the iPhone XS. But the problem is, it's just not as sharp as what I'm seeing on the 6T. It's ever so slightly different. I don't think it's as much as you think, but the OnePlus 6T with the higher megapixel count is definitely showing its value when it comes to photo selfies. It's sharper, it has a wider field of view. I just wish the colors were a bit more rich like what you're seeing with the iPhone when it comes to the skin tones. But if you do like sharpness and detail as well as a wider angle field of view, the OnePlus 6T is the way to go. I'm really impressed. And here's another shot of myself. Definitely, if you look at the jacket that I'm wearing, the colors are much more true to life to what you're seeing on the iPhone XS Max. I definitely like the color science that is coming from these iPhones. I just wish they were a bit sharper. That's just me personally, that I like a sharper image, which is something that the OnePlus 6T is doing well because there's enough light for it to be able to use all those megapixels that it's got in there. But the dynamic range to me and the colors and how they're rendered on the iPhone XS Max is something that I prefer. I just feel like it's slightly too muted and less realistic to life compared to what you've seen on the iPhone XS Max. But again, let me know what you think. These cameras in their respective portrait bokeh mode, where you have that with the iPhone XS and also the depth effect on what you have on the OnePlus 6T. Now with it on the iPhone XS, you're using a telephoto zoom, so it does really crop in. So whoever was taking a picture for me had to really step back to try and judge the same distance. But because there isn't a telephoto zoom on the OnePlus 6T, you can get closer and have the depth effect from a distance and you have more room to play with. Both seem to really struggle in terms of edge detection. I would say that the iPhone XS has better dynamic range in terms of the exposure in the background, where it's really slightly blown out on the 6T, but in terms of the background blur, they're both doing a really good job. But in terms of the edge detection, the iPhone for this one struggled a lot more. You can see the defects around the top of my head on the iPhone on the right. But one thing you do have with the iPhone, which is something that they've added, is the simulation of a full frame wide open aperture after you've taken a shot. So you can adjust it from what it's actually simulating at default, which is f4.5, all the way down to f1.4, all the way up to f16. So that it's either closed or wide open, and it will simulate how an aperture would actually behave when it's wide open or closed up. And also you've got the different portrait lighting modes, such as studio lighting, mono lighting. These are all different portrait modes that you can change on the fly after you've taken a shot, and also before when you're doing portrait mode on the iPhone XS. But in it, overall, let me know which one you like. I do like the portrait mode on the iPhone XS better because obviously the exposure, the dynamic range, the extra flexibility, but it did struggle more with the edge detection compared to what I was seeing on the 6T, and I did take some consistent shots. So that's the toss up. Let me know what you think out of the two. And then portrait selfie mode, the iPhone just looks way too soft. Again, I like the color rendition and how it just renders colors when it comes to skin tones, but it's so soft. If you look on the 6T, the edge detection is actually doing a slightly better job, or it's actually on par between both of them. But I like the sharpness and the detail that you get from the 6T. I just wish both these phones could just merge together, because I just feel like it's a bit too muted. But again, that kind of more muted, cooler look to the image, it might be a preference to you, so let me know. But the sharpness and the detail is something I'm digging on the 6T a lot more compared to the muddy kind of soft look on the iPhone XS. And yes, I am running the latest version of iOS, so it should have been fixed in terms of the sharpness and the detail, but I'm just not getting it. So yeah, man, those are my preferences. Now, the last set of pictures indoors with my wife, you can see that the characteristics are pretty much rounded the same. Much more muted and natural and neutral on the 6T compared to that warmer, slightly more rich to the skin tones of the iPhone XS. But in terms of actually the sharpness, the details, the noise, they're pretty even. The image quality of the 6T really holds up well when it comes to photography, on par to actually what you're seeing on the iPhone XS Max, which again, it's a bit of a surprise to me, but it's more credit to the 6T for the price that it's holding its own when it comes to photography. And as DJ Khaled would say, another one and the last one. This pretty much wraps it up. So take a pause, have a look. The characteristics are near enough the same, and that about pretty much sums up how both of these phones behave. Quick conclusion to the photo comparison side of this video. And if you've not seen the video comparison side, go watch that video as well and let me know what you think in terms of the video performance. But in terms of the photo, these are my odd conclusions to it, which really surprised me. I actually overall think that the selfie is better on the 6T. And this is something I really struggle to actually admit, because the sharpness and the detail really stands out to me, even though I love the colors of what I was seeing on the iPhone XS, but it's just too soft. And you can definitely see this in low light. In low light, the OnePlus 6T definitely takes the cup, especially with flash illumination, and also for the fact that the wide angle on there for the selfie is something that will come in handy a lot more compared to a crop, especially when it comes to when you want to take group selfies. The dynamic range again is a problem on OnePlus with the 6T, and it's the inconsistency. It has the potential to really pull it off, but it's the inconsistencies of the dynamic range is what worries me, and it's something I hope they can tune, because I think the hardware is there. They just need to tune the processing side of things. But the dynamic range is definitely something that favors more the iPhone XS Max. That smart HDR is really kicking in well. Portrait mode, in terms of edge detection, really needs a work on both these phones, but I would say it slightly needs a bit more work on the iPhone with my results that I had. But again, even with that, I would say I still prefer the iPhone just because of the flexibility before and also after the shot, especially with being able to adjust the background blur and simulate how it does behave with a wide open aperture or a really closed one, and also the different portrait lighting modes as well. I just like the extra flexibility, but both need work with the edge detection. The dynamic range is better on the iPhone XS when it comes to portrait mode, but the edge detection just needs to be fixed more. I would say slightly more on the iPhone XS. Now that about wraps it up. Let me know what you think of this style. If it's something that you want to see more of, just me talking to you guys and seeing more of my narrative while I'm actually showing you different pictures, let me know in the comment section below if it's something that you want to see more of. That about wraps it up. Again, if you haven't seen the video comparison side of both these phones, go check it out as well. Watch it with the photo comparison. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm your host Ben on the Lover of Tech channel. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS, the Tech Lover Squad, so you do not miss any of the latest content that is going to be posted on this channel. I'm your host Ben, signing out, and I will see you next time.